part of working towards mastering something is knowing when to turn it off and when to turn it back on. I'm not married to keto. If you watch my channel a lot and you watch my videos, you know that. You know that keto is the foundation as a hormetic stressor for a lot of what I do and how I eat. But I deploy carbohydrates as needed. I implement carb strategy when I have specific use cases for it. Because I'm not married to the diet, I'm married to the outcome. And it would be foolish for me to say, oh, I'm going to keep doing something that doesn't have a practical use case. It's easy for us to think as a community and get sort of tribal about our diet, right? We think we do keto, so we have to justify everything keto. And keto is good for everything because it's the way that we feel the sense of community. And keto is good for a lot of things, but having to constantly defend is not good either. Being able to try different things, have a foundation for what you like, and what I owe a lot of credit to because I lost 100 pounds with it, but also being able to put carbohydrates into a proper perspective so that I can use them to get the best outcome. I am not married to the diet, I am married to the outcome and to the performance. So a while back when I published that video talking about how I do this and how I've done it for the last 12 years, it raised question as to, well, when is the good time to come off of keto? And I'm not talking about long term, I'm talking about when is a good time to say, hey, I think I should have some carbs right now. So I'll tell you when I come off of keto, and then you can play around with it as you need. So I'll level with you on the first one. Okay, so the first time I'll come off keto is when I feel like I need better sleep. Okay, about 4.5 years ago when my son was born, my first kid, it disrupted my sleep. My wife and I, we are in this together and we have no family close by. It is us, okay? Just us and those kids. And we were up all night together doing our thing. And the fact is that disrupted my sleep. And it's taken me a while to get it back. Now, it is common knowledge that keto can negatively impact sleep. Okay, it can because your catecholamines, your noradrenaline, your epinephrine is spiked a little bit higher. And also you have a high presence of ketones that are flooding to the brain and it can make you feel awake. And a lot of times people talk about this, okay? But they also tend to flip it and say, oh, well, keto is good for everything, so it's gonna help my sleep. When in reality, it doesn't always help your sleep. So periodically, if I find like my sleep is suffering, and you guys notice it, you guys have said it before, Thomas, you look tired. Yeah, darn right I get tired. Especially if I'm not sleeping well, I get tired. So that's when I say, okay, it is time to take a break. There's nothing wrong with accepting that it's time to ease off, add some carbohydrates back, just like our ancestors would have eaten. Our ancestors would occasionally have some carbohydrates from fruit or whatever, right? So that's when I'll put some carbohydrates back, and I'll usually do that for 3 or 4 weeks. I'm not gonna get into the super granular, I'm just giving you the reasons, okay? And then we can expand more. But it usually takes about 2 days before it helps my sleep restore again, and I only have to do that for a couple of weeks before I can go right back into keto and be fine with sleep. It acts as a reset, and it has to do with, as I've talked about, tryptophan and how tryptophan can get into the brain and convert into melatonin better because there's less competition from what are called large neutral amino acids circulating through your body. That's not really relevant for right now. Okay, another time that I will introduce carbohydrates into my diet is when I am increasing training volume significantly. Now, specifically, if I am separating my cardio from my weight training. And the reason that I say that is I really like to do cardio in a fasted state. I know that people have what they have to say about that, and I'm not saying that the way that anybody is doing it is wrong, but we all have our personal preferences. I like to be doing cardio in a fasted state. When it comes to my strength training, I can get by having food in my system. But let's say, for example, that I'm starting to really increase my training. Well, if I'm increasing my training volume, what I'll like to do is be low carb in the morning, or I'll train fasted, do cardio fasted in the morning, and then I'll eat and I'll have some carbohydrates and then train in the afternoon in a fed state with my strength training. I don't always do this, but it's just an example. So if I start doing double days and I'm training, my training volume increases, that's when I might have some more carbohydrates, simply because I'm trying to condition my body to still be glucose tolerant under load. What that means is if I always train in a fasted state or I always train in a lesser fed state or a ketogenic state, my body loses some of the efficiency at metabolizing glucose under extreme load when I'm exercising. So for you, what you may want to consider is if you're doing keto, maybe take a month of saying, hey, I'm going to do some double day workouts for a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and have some carbs, maybe some fruit, some sweet potatoes, red potatoes, purple potatoes, things like that. Another one that I really have to level with people on is very similar to the sleep one. You guys probably know this about me. I was overweight before. Well, I wasn't just overweight, I was depressed and I had a lot of anxiety. But that wasn't just because I was overweight. I always have suffered with anxiety and depression. It's something that is very real to me, and it's something that's very, very real to a lot of people. Unfortunately, people talk about it now, and it's okay to talk about it. You don't have to hide it. I still suffer with that. I work my hands to the bone, quite frankly, and sometimes I just beat myself up about it. There is a very clear indicator that carbohydrates can have a positive influence on serotonin production. But not just that, it's about being able to have a more diverse diet for a short period of time to stimulate the microbiome to be more diverse. 90% of our serotonin is formed in the gut. So if you start finding that you're getting yourself into these little depressive holes every now and then, eating a different plethora of foods and a more diverse profile of foods can help you out with that, because a more diverse microbiome leads to more short-chain fatty acids, which lead to more of that serotonin that travels up the vagal nerve to the brain. Okay, so that neurotransmitter is responsible for helping you feel good. And when you are doing keto for an extended period of time, you end up a lot of times having a deficiency there. People deal with it a lot. Now, on the other side of the coin, people that deal with chronic depression, chronic anxiety, sometimes see benefit from a ketogenic diet because it helps you tilt towards more of what is called the gamma aminobutyric acid scale versus the glutamate scale. But it is a perfect example of how sometimes it works for that case, sometimes it doesn't. If you were to take 100 people that do keto, 50% of them would say it helps their anxiety, depression, 50% of them say if they do it for too long, it hurts it. So that is when I bring it into the equation for me. One thing, no matter what, that's very, very important is if you do switch over to the carbohydrates, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing the protein first. And I just want to give this as a tip before I move into my next one. Okay, protein first. It's way too easy to come off keto and start bringing in just a bunch of carbohydrates and letting the protein be second thought. Do not let the protein take a back seat. Eat the protein first and then the carbohydrates. Also, there's evidence that having protein first will attenuate the glucose response 2x more than even fat will. The point is, protein controls that glucose spike significantly. So before you go out to eat or anything like that, if you're going to have some carbohydrates, have a protein shake or something before doing that. That is usually my go-to. I keep protein powder in my car for those situations when I'm gonna go eat some carbohydrates. That way, no matter what, I have some protein on hand. Whole foods are always better, but a protein shake is gonna at least help you out with modulating the glucose and getting the protein first. I put a link down below for the protein that I usually use. It's called SunWarrior. So that particular protein is really cool because they have their active line, which is a pea-based protein powder, but also really cool because it has pumpkin protein in it. I'm a big fan of the plant-based proteins when it comes to the powders because you're getting a lot more of that diversity that you're looking for. So we're talking nice fiber content with it, but we're also talking really cool enzymes that are added to it, as well as a probiotic that's added to it as well, which makes it a really cool line. And that's why it's called their active line. So that link down below will save you 15% off. So use that link, save 15% off SunWarrior's active line protein, plus any other of their active line products like their creatine or their hydration or anything like that. So those links down below in the description to try them out. The next one that's very important is when I start feeling like my joints are getting stiffer. I listen to my body a lot. I pay very close attention to how my body is feeling. Okay, now one of the things that can happen when you're doing keto for a longer period of time is you get a little dehydrated. Okay, it just happens. Lower levels of insulin, you excrete more water, and that happens. Well, along with that, you can lose some fluid in your joints. Well, sometimes it can take a while before you notice it, but you start realizing, hey, I'm not really firing the way that I normally do. I feel like my joints are stiff. I feel like my bones are kind of creaking. That isn't an uncommon experience. Now, the controversy comes on the other side because keto can be very anti-inflammatory, Beta-hydroxybutyrate is anti-inflammatory. So for people that have like chronic aches and pains, a lot of times they find that keto helps them. But people like myself, where most of my aches and pains come from being super overweight before, or from pushing weights around and hurting my body and beating my body up, I'm a different situation, right? I'm not dealing with chronic pain, I'm dealing with pain that is self-inflicted. And it gets to a point where, okay, it's time to add some carbs back in, because what I find it does is it allows my muscles to volumize a little bit more, and it also allows my joints to hydrate a little bit more. Because there's no denying that when you're doing keto, you tend to drop some water and dehydrate a little bit. So if you start finding that that happens, that might be a good time to say, hey, take 3 or 4 weeks off. Just keep it strict and keep it clean. You need to have more responsibility with your carbohydrates than you really do any other time. Like when you go on carbs, you should not be just eating cakes and pies. You should be exercising more restraint with carbohydrates than you probably do when you're on keto. So it's not for being lazy. You're not going off keto because you're lazy. If anything, you have to be more attentive. And I promise you that. You have to be more attentive. Otherwise, you start slipping up. Because for people like you and I, that are of addictive personality, which is probably why I started doing keto in the first place, to get me away from the carbs that I was addicted to, you have to be in control. So do not go off of keto if you do not feel like you can maintain composure and keep control. The next one is going to come as a complete shock. And this is when I need to reduce calories to try to change my body composition temporarily. What are you talking about? Well, I talked about years ago how I would do this high-low approach to keto, where I'd go relatively high fat and then I'd go low fat. Believe it or not, you're probably eating more calories on keto than you think you are. Okay, because there's such a low volume of food for how many calories you get with keto, because fats have 9 calories per gram and, well, carbs have 4. So when you're doing keto, it's easy to eat a lot of calories with a lower volume of food. I find that if I need to tighten up, believe it or not, I actually go off of keto, bring some carbs into the equation, and I end up eating less calories with more volume of food. Because if I start adding in sweet potatoes, if I start adding in red potatoes, if I start adding in fruit, I'm getting a decent volume of food with less than half the calories of what I'm used to. So then I have my protein, I have my carbs, and I have my small amount of fat. Next thing you know, I've reduced calories by 200 or 300 per day and haven't even tried. And I tighten up and I feel like I'm getting a treat, because carbs have become a treat because I haven't had them in X number of months. So it really just is the best of both worlds. I get to enjoy the treat of some carbohydrates, but I'm also refilling my glycogen stores a little bit more, and I'm feeling like my body's getting a chance to utilize it a little bit more, and overall it just feels good. But the bottom line, no matter what, when you are cycling on and off keto, is to keep it controlled and listen to your body. There is not a right or wrong number, but I will say that at minimum, you want to be doing keto for at least a month or 6 weeks before you ever consider cycling off. Realistically, more like 2 months or 3 months before you cycle off. And you have to find the reason that works for you. And it should always be that adaptation. When you go off keto, you should feel good, not bad. When you go back on keto, you should feel good, not bad. And if you feel bad, you might need to reel things back and take a better look. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.